creative creative public affairs firm. We're based in LA, but we work all over the country. Before we begin today's discussion, we would just want to make sure that we all are kind of operating from the same frame of reference and definition about what we mean when we say cultural strategies. So let's get into that. It is a range of different forms of communication fundamentally, but those that are not restricted to press releases or just simply texting platforms or direct mail or something like that. Cultural strategies can actually encompass activations that relate to any of the icons that you see here, which are from the book Making Waves by Liz Mann and the Culture Group, which we'll talk about later in this discussion. Next slide. So here are some examples of the manifestation of cultural moments that impacted issues or calls to action in some way. I think all of us are extremely familiar with the Hope poster, and which I regard as kind of a quintessential definition of that. The collaborator with the artist Shepard Fairey, Yossi, I think is with us today in this discussion. But that was really a pinnacle moment, I think, for this field known as cultural organizing. You also see it creep up, though, in other ways. The poem from our great poet Gorman that was at the inauguration earlier this year. Last year, this work on the right by artist Tatiana Fazla-Alizadeh was part of the Enough of Trump effort led by and created by People for the American Way. Next slide. And then here's some more. There's a great poster series that was done by Amplifier called Thriving People, Thriving Places, which both embrace causes related to indigenous peoples as well as the environment. The Little John 2014 Rock the Vote video, Turn Out for What? The moment in which Taylor Swift in 2018 made a plea to young voters to vote in the US Senate election, which apparently broke the internet, or at least a couple of the register to vote websites on the day that it happened. And, also in a fun way, but using another medium, which is dance, the pantsuit flash mob moment that happened in 2016 in support of Hillary Clinton. Next slide. It's worth noting that, despite everything I just said, cultural strategies are not exclusively about being artsy either. It's about meeting people where they're at and communicating with them through their own cultural identifiers or experiences. So sometimes that can mean messages that are on barns in rural areas, or, things that are infused in video gaming, or, mixed with trucker culture, as you see it with the hat here. And of course, the whole world of super fandoms, from Black Panther to other movies and films that have given those fandoms an opportunity to talk about issues related to justice and the kind of world we want to see. So, to just sum up here, it is also not about making things pretty or artsy. It's actually about relating to a variety of audiences who, quite frankly, don't read message points, don't read the New York Times editorials, or listen to NPR or watch Sunday talk shows. In other words, the majority of America. But cultural strategies speak to them and their soul in a different way. It's more emotional, it's less literal, it's more experiential, and it's less editorial. And I would argue it shakes up and shifts the very environment upon which many of you organize on the ground.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Wyatt. That's super helpful context as we dive in to our case studies, which we'll be getting to in just a second. But first, we actually want to launch a quick poll just to get a sense of who we have on this call with us and just sort of a baseline as far as where folks are coming from in this conversation. There's obviously, a lot of different levels of familiarity with cultural organizing, cultural strategies, different ideas about what it is, and lots of different types of even professions represented on this call. So if you have access to a keyboard, if you're not calling in from your phone, if you're able to just quickly fill out this poll, we'd love to just get a sense of who all we have in the room and the different capacities in which this information that we'll be discussing today might be relevant to your own work, just to get a sense of.
Wait, Rio, I think the poll disappeared. Could you repost it?
Sure, yeah. If Frank or Nick, who's running the poll behind the scenes, could reshare it. I see it here. Does not look like
it's back on. Thank you.
Results. Okay, great. Thank you. I think you had that. That was Heather. Thank you for flagging that.
It just disappeared again for me.
Okay, seeing a
Yeah,
lot
same
of,
here.
It's
Okay.
only giving us enough time to fill out the first question, and then as soon as you go to the second one, it vanishes.
I think whenever you move, whoever's sharing the poll, whenever you move from the poll, it moves from us as well. Like it closes the poll out.
Oh,
all right, hang on.
okay.
Let me try one more time. Sorry, y'all.
Apologies for that. Yeah, bear with us. We'll see if we can launch this successfully once. And certainly don't want to let ourselves get tripped over it for too long. So we'll see if we can get this working. Looks like it might be working now. Okay, great. Awesome. Real-time troubleshooting, always fun. Thanks so much for flagging that though. And yeah, seeing lots of folks replying here. Excellent, excellent. Thanks so much. Pretty good spread so far. Very cool to see these results coming in real time. We'll share the results of the poll in just a few moments. Give people just another minute or so to fill it out, just to get a sense of where we're all coming from. Great, great. We got pretty good participation so far. Excellent. Thank you everyone for filling this out. And again, while we're waiting to finish up the poll, just want to remind folks during these next 4 presentations, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll be compiling them all and circling back to them during the Q&A portion. So be sure to get them in there. We'll be capturing them and circling back. Great. All right. How do we feel about the results? Should we stop the poll? All right, I believe the poll has ended. Everyone should be able to see the results on your screen. Looks like we've got a lot of folks from the nonprofit world, which is very understandable. A number of consultants as well. A couple folks from creative agencies, arts and entertainment, 1 or 2 people from government, a number of others. That's great. Some diversity here in terms of professional fields. Even more so here in terms of the different types of roles that we have. Very interesting to see. Pretty good spread there, and a pretty good spread here in terms of levels of familiarity with cultural strategies and experience as well. So thanks again for filling this out, and we'll be sharing another form later in the call for anyone that's interested in diving more deeply into the information that we'll be covering today, and especially if you have any particular questions or challenges that you are facing in your own work. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and dive into our first case study presentation from Michael Crawford at MoveOn. Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Rio. Hi, everybody. I hope that you are doing well. As Rio said, I'm Michael Crawford. I'm Director of Marketing at MoveOn. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a campaign that we did last year called Your Vote is Power. So last year, to get young people especially excited about voting, we came up with the idea for Your Vote is Power. We were looking at what was happening in the larger culture. So one, people were just exhausted and tired after 4 years of Trump in the White House. We were in the early months of the COVID pandemic, and protests for racial justice led by the Movement for Black Lives were sprouting up across the country. And one of the things that we saw was people feeling powerless, and we wanted to help them feel powerful. Next slide, please. And so our target audience was young people. We targeted young people, especially because young people tend to vote at lower rates than, like my grandpa. And we knew that in order for Democrats to win, we need a strong turnout from young people. One of the purposes was to be a counter to the messages telling young people that their votes don't matter and that their votes don't count. And one of the things we knew was that in order to get people to vote, or the way to get people to vote, was to actually talk about voting. And so I'm going to show you 3 examples of how we did that. Next slide, please. So we partnered with Amplify, which is an organization that you heard Wyatt reference earlier, on some art. We worked with 3 different artists, and this is our examples of work that we did with artist Thomas Wimberly. And these designs, obviously based on the Statue of Liberty, we created them as posters, as stickers, as magnets. And with these particular works of art, we really wanted to launch the campaign, inspire MoveOn members, and get them really excited about the work that we needed to do in order to turn out voters. Next slide, please. Now, you've heard mention of Task Force Into Action, and you see some love in the chat for them as well. We partnered with them on gifts and stickers. Now, so among the things that we know is that in order to reach young people, you actually have to do it on their phones. If you don't reach them on your phones, you're not going to be reaching them at all. And so as a part of the Your Vote is Power, we wanted to take that simple message, your vote is power, and use it in as many creative ways as possible to get out to the audience that we wanted. We use themes like nostalgia with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which everybody remembers from when they were a kid. We did it with inspirational type messaging about electing Raphael Warnock as the first Black senator from Georgia. And then, of course, we always have to tap into Mean Girls, because Mean Girls is everything. And people would recognize these, understand these, and use them and share them with their friends. And the work that we did with Into Action around these gifts generated 3.4 billion organic views. Next slide, please. And the final example I'm going to talk to you about is some work that we also did with Task Force Into Action. For this particular piece of the work, we invited celebrities to let us design unique get out the vote nails for them that we would ask them to take pictures and post on their Instagram feeds. So the first image there is Olivia Pope herself, Kerry Washington, who's a fantastic actress and a fantastic progressive activist. The second slide is probably one of my favorites. It's from the singer Ciara. And if you look closely and you're a Cardi B fan, you probably see that she looks like Cardi B's first album cover. She posted that for Halloween, posted a picture of her and her son looking like Cardi and Offset with the simple message, swipe left for a special message. And that's when people got to see the nails that said vote. And then the last image here is Halsey, who is absolutely amazing. And she got great feedback and support on her post as well. Now, out of this, this last nail art thing, we actually got a lot of earned media from it as well. And so among the lessons that I think that we can take from this, this campaign, which is 3 things. 1, have a clear and simple message. 2, go all in on creatively communicating that message wherever your audience is going to be. And then 3, try things and don't be afraid to fail. Because especially with the cultural work, we're working on serious issues, but we also want to have a lot of fun while doing it. And I'll hand it back to you, Rio.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Michael. Such cool case studies, seeing lots of love in the chat, especially for the nails and the gifts and the stickers from Into Action. Also seeing some great questions. So please keep the questions coming again. We'll be circling back to them. during the Q&A portion of today's program. But next, we have a presentation from Yadira Sanchez, Co-Executive Director of Poder Latinx. Yadi, over to you.
Thanks, Rio. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Yadira Sanchez, Co-Executive Director for Latinx, and also a partner with Democracy Partners. I will get it started. First, I wanted to share a little bit about our organization. Poder Latinx is a civic and social justice organization taking on an innovative, comprehensive engagement approach that intentionally integrates community organizing and leadership development into our civic engagement work to build political power for our community. We were founded in 2019, and we currently have operations in Arizona, Florida, and Georgia. Our work is centered around economic, environmental, and immigrant justice. So just a little bit of background on the organization. Also to set the stage, similar to what Michael mentioned, 2020 was a very unpredictable year. And we can go to the next slide. It really threw a curveball at us. We did not see this coming. At that point, we had 60 team members on the ground. We had registered 33,000 people in person, and we had open offices when the pandemic hit, and our entire community was impacted quite immediately in the first phase. So we pivot our work to rapid response. We provided direct services, food banks, phone banks, and we focus on hopefully on keeping our team intact and hired during the pandemic. But it also opened a door for creativity, and we got creative, and we decided to continue engaging, and we go to the next slide, our community through our Votar es Poder campaign. And it served as the central umbrella for all our remote field and digital efforts. It was designed to strategically target different segments within the Latinx community, while at the same time bridging culture, art, and politics. And I'm gonna go through some of the different projects that were part of this campaign that we used to creatively, innovatively engage our community during the pandemic. If we go to the next slide, we were very excited to partner with Somos Arte, which is the creator of La Borinqueña. We designed a four episode webcomic for the election, very much targeting the Latinx youth and the Puerto Rican voters in Florida. It was designed with a Puerto Rican creator, the creator of La Borinqueña is Puerto Rican. We also had actress and activist Rosario Dawson be the voice of La Borinqueña. And we also partner with our friends at Univision who helped us uplift and gave us tremendous earned media with the uplifting all these PSAs. Each PSA focused on a theme. So it was voter registration, voting early, getting out to vote the day of the election. And we even came with a fourth episode to vote empower folks to vote during the Georgia Senate runoff election. The last episode, we even brought in we brought influencers of Mexican heritage because of, again, the focus in Georgia was more predominantly Mexican voters, Mexican American voters than Puerto Rican voters like we did in Florida. If we go to the next slide, we also partner with 15 Latinx artists, mostly Chicano artists, that we're utilizing their art to empower our community to get civically engaged. We had many art, and I invite you all to visit the virtual art gallery. It won a Poly Award, so it's an award-winning gallery. And also enjoy the playlist by DJ Nino, all progressive and in an original playlist, using their art to engage our community in a different form for a different segment of our community. Now we go to the next slide. We also partner with Las Cafeteras, a Chicano East LA band, and we were partnered with Wyatt with the Big Bold of Ideas on these songs as well, and other nonprofits like the New Georgia Project and the Center for Cultural Power to use music as a way to engage the community, as a way to reach young Latinx folks through this different form. This was very new to us, and really it was very one of the most exciting projects we did the year, getting to work on a music video that we hear music, but we've never been involved in the process, so that was very exciting. And moving on also to the next slide, we also wanted to make sure we were targeting the LGBTQ+ community. So we designed, our Arizona team designed the Voter Drag Squad, which was a campaign bringing together drag entertainers from Arizona using again the drag community to uplift. We had billboards all over downtown Phoenix. There were infographics, PSAs that we were uplifting, all specifically targeting a different segment of our community. If we go to the next slide, of course, we cannot leave the Latinas out. So we also partner with She Se Puede and Poderistas, using these PSAs and the influencers that we are very well known in our community to use a Latina to Latina approach. Again, partnering with Univision was key, with Intravision Radio. We even did targeted ads where we were reaching the community where they were. And then I know to close it up, I'm probably getting close to time. The next slide, just key takeaways and the impact that we have. These are the numbers that our organization was able to pull, all using different layers in this campaign. But the key takeaways, like similar to on the electoral campaigns on the ground, we need talent, we need time, and we need resources. We needed partnerships like this to make this type of campaign a reality. We need ample time because it's great to create content, but if we don't have time to disseminate, it's also another thing to take into consideration, and resources, flexibility to do these types of great innovative campaigns. So I'll turn it back over to you, Rio.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Yadi. Seeing lots of shout outs and support in the chat, along with some great questions, which we'll get to. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the soundtrack that we had right at the top of this call for those that were on was one of your productions. So I think we had a lot of fans of that, and so cool to see a little bit more of the great work that you have been helping to lead. Peter, next. So next we'll be hearing from Betsy Richards to share a little bit about the work that she's been leading at the Opportunity Agenda. Betsy, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Betsy Richards. I'm the Director of Cultural Strategies at the Opportunity Agenda. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Rio. We're a social justice communication lab that's based in New York City. We use communications and culture to help shift dominant narratives. We work in partnership with advocates and artists, and we're here to help folks like you by offering open source tools, research, and messaging guidance. Next slide. I'm going to share with you today some examples of one of our cultural strategy frameworks. And I see that a lot of you in the poll are communications and marketing folks. So this is particularly focused for a way to think about combining communications and culture. I'll offer some quick examples from the past and do a little deeper dive into a current collaboration. All of them are focused around discussion guides with calls to action. Next slide. I also want to point out that there are many ways in this work and at different scales of budget, influencer access, and audience to do cultural strategy. So this all isn't one way in. Next slide. My first example is on our work to shift the narrative on racial bias and policing, and focuses on our collaboration with both the Broadway show and the Netflix production of American Son starring Kerry Washington. Our goal was to equip ourselves and our partners with tools to engage in audience conversations that are all based on our messaging and guidance, and also direct folks on ways to take action. So through this powerful vehicle, we hosted transformative cross-cultural conversations with Kerry and the cast, as well as with leading advocates like Alicia Garza and Vincent Warren. We did that in New York, Atlanta, Miami, Chicago, and LA, and we also sparked online conversation that reached millions. Next slide. Okay, in starting with that one, I want to point out that you don't need a celebrity or much of a budget. Just please don't forget about this technique. You can piggyback on pop culture and fandom. And like we did with the release of the film Black Panther, we weren't hobnobbing with Marvel. We had a partnership with Tumblr, and that we used that moment to spark conversation and take action. And I just want to remind you that cultural strategy can mean working with a culture that is around you and that is at your fingertips. Next slide. Our current partnership with the good folks at Amplifier is focused on creating new art and leading conversations on what an abundant and just economy looks like. And coming out of the pandemic, there has never been more an important a moment. When we first partnered, we were interested in disrupting prevailing storylines about poverty that place blame on individuals and ignore racial bias, systemic barriers. And we also really wanted to be paying attention to solutions that are coming from community. We were aligned in that both of our organizations offer all of our tools and content as open source. So we were also committed to following our own advice to tell an affirmative story and answer a call from our partners that they said they really didn't have images to show what economic justice really looks like. Next slide. We partnered with Amplifier to commission 3 artists, Rami Torrico, Noah Denman, and Alex Albadri, and they came back with incredible art focused on our 4 values: voice, community, opportunity, and security. And they did an amazing job at putting forward visions of what a just and abundant society looks like for all. The artists offered us really, really incredible visions, and those are open source. Next slide. We also wanted to equip our partners to host those discussions like we had done before. But because of the pandemic, this was now exclusively online, and we really needed to direct folks to take action. We offered them a discussion guide in both English and Spanish, framed around our messaging again, and shared with partners that reached hundreds of thousands of folks. Next slide. Our partnership with Amplifier also meant working with their network of over 16,000 teachers. And we created a curriculum building off of that discussion guide that in this moment was really important, and it was uniquely tailored to distance learning. Teachers were really hungry for this. And with that, we reached over 1 million students across the United States to engage in conversations about what economic justice looks like. Next slide. And I just want to end by saying, yes, the pandemic made us all shift our tactics, but we hope as we emerge that we can take these incredible open source assets that I just want to stress to you that commissioning artists really does make a difference, and encourage you to do it. It's incredible collateral. And we hope to do in-person art interventions and equip our partners with posters for marches, and to continue to find ways to engage us all in collective visioning for what a just and abundant society looks like for all. Thank you.
That is so great to see and hear. Thank you, Betsy. We have one more presentation before we dive into the Q&A. I've seen a lot of great questions come through already. We're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. But first, a case study from Wyatt Closs with some of the work that he's been leading at Big Bowl of Ideas. Wyatt, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Rio. As referenced, we are a Black-owned creative public affairs shop. And in the last year, we've mounted over 24 cultural projects in one way or another, sometimes pop-up art show, sometimes generating hundreds of art forward digital shares, as we did for the New Georgia Project during the Georgia runoffs, to video production. But today we're going to talk about one of those projects, which is Dear Frontline, which takes a look at how a cultural strategy can grow over a much longer arc of time. Next slide. I'm going to start here and let this slide linger a bit, because if there was ever a moment when this quote from Toni Morrison rang loudest to me, it was in the formation of this project. Next slide. We started with a very simple idea at the outset of COVID-19 in April 2020, which was to ask artists to contribute works that would honor frontline and essential workers. We commissioned these works, paid the artists, or created licensing agreements with them. We asked both high-profile artists as well as emerging artists. We knew that there was already the banking of pots and things like that as hospital workers were going, like in New York and other places. But we wanted to create something that we thought would be more art forward and hopefully more elastic. Next slide. So we added another dimension to this idea, which was to create a platform in which people could send digital greeting cards with the art that they choose to any location treating COVID-19 patients, or to shout out its workers. So if you wanted to send something to the workers at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta for the work that they did in taking care of your uncle, you pick the art, send it, send that message as well as publicize that message. Next slide. So within the first week, there were about 10,000 views and 1,000 digital postcards sent. These are some live examples that are still on the website that you can see. And it kept growing. And so did the number of partner organizations, foundations that took interest and contributed more funds that allowed us to enhance the tech capacity, expand the range of art and artists, and market the project effectively. Next slide. It's worth noting that artist Shepard Fairey, whose work we've seen in a couple of places already, no surprise, boosted the effort of Dear Frontline by creating this piece and then having a sale of a limited edition print of the work, the proceeds of which went to Dear Frontline and to pay for those emerging artists who really during the age of, the onset of COVID really needed the resources. So it was great to see that way in which an artist and his energy helped inspire other artists. Next slide. So by July and September of 2020, two things happened. We did a Kickstarter campaign effort, which went very well and generated more press and attention to the project, so much so allowing us to take some bolder steps. And by September, we had also been in a partnership with a project anchored by the National Domestic Workers Alliance known as Honor Essential Workers during Labor Day weekend, which again, utilized the art. And it's worth noting that, in some cases you'll see this art kind of regularly, and that's because we brokered agreements with the artists for licensing so that for every time there was progress in the campaign in which their work was featured, they got more compensation. And so we think that was an important element of this project and one that people should always remember. Do not go asking artists to be down for the cause and therefore not compensate them adequately. Moving to the next slide, we took all of those resources and many campaigns and then started doing street marketing and street art guerrilla tactics around the country. You'll see two examples here of wheat paste and what I would call a vinyl adhesive mural in Atlanta, working with photographer Sheila Pre-Bright, who's been doing some amazing photography for many years now. We also, in this moment, turned a corner message-wise, and we got right into doing more than just thanking essential workers, but actually advocating for essential workers' rights. We also changed the tech back end so that it was no longer about just sending a shout out, but it was engineered so that people could send a digital greeting card to their member of Congress, just with a simple lookup and send a message. Next slide. And so lastly, as that mural project took root and continued into January of this year, an art gallery in North Carolina took note of it and proposed an actual live group art show be held in their space, which was great. But mind you, nearly half of the artwork was created for a website initially. And so we actually had to reverse sort of the production process art-wise to go from digital back to organic. And that show was held later this summer and wrapped just a few weeks ago. Again, generating donations not only to the project, but also proceeds to the artist as well. So it was a complete regular cycle of opportunities and challenges and sort of parlaying and leveraging into the next phase of the campaign, a campaign for which we didn't know what the end was, because honestly, we're still in the moment in which this project was created for, right? So that's it. And I'll take it back to Rio.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Wyatt. Such a timely and powerful case study and campaign, to say the least, particularly relevant for all of us this past year and a half, continuing to this day, living through this ongoing pandemic. So we're going to be transitioning now to the question and answer portion. I've gotten a lot of great questions. We're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. But before we dive into that, we're going to drop into the chat a form that we invite you to fill out now or later if you have thoughts or questions that you want a little bit more guidance or clarity on. If you want to dive a little bit deeper into any of these things that have been discussed today, we invite you to fill out that form that was just shared in the chat, and someone can circle back with you, especially if we aren't able to address all of the questions that were shared in the chat today. This form is another great place to ask that question, and someone can circle back with you. So please do take a few minutes if you want to fill it out and dive a little bit deeper. So with that, again, we've gotten a lot of great questions. Let's start with this one here. I think this is probably one that a lot of people can relate to. This person asked, I'm having a lot of difficulty getting my organization to embrace cultural organizing and/or artistic activism, creative actions. What's a good way to get people to embrace these new creative strategies? And perhaps as an addendum, what's a way to get decision makers on board and willing to spend money on some of these campaigns? I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on this, but maybe Michael, if we can kick it to you first, and then anyone else that wants to chime in would love to have that.
I knew you were going to come to me first, Rio. So I think the way to do it is to start small and build. So rather than proposing something where you're saying you're going to be able to get, Beyonce and Jay-Z to be the faces of your campaign, go a little bit smaller. So if you notice in the three examples of the work of the case study, that I shared, one of them involved celebrities, but the others were smaller, right? Like the gift work that we did with Task Force, and I think some of the Task Force folks are on the call right now. It was really around gifts, which we see around us all the time. So it's a little bit easier to say, oh, we want to try this with gifts. And I manage expectations of folks in the organization. But as we got more success, we're seeing how the gifts were resonating. When our executive director said she was seeing them show up on her Facebook and Instagram page, when she said that she actually started to use it, then I knew it was a good time to go in and ask for more budget to make more stuff. But I think the way there are a couple of things. One, start small and build from there as you have success. Two, frame it as experiments. We want to try these things, not like we're going to build this blowout campaign, but we want to, you could have in the back of your head that you're building a blowout campaign, but talk about it as you're going to try this and see what happens. And then also, I would also say, feel free to look at what's happening in the culture and point the people who can say yes to what's happening. Because think about what we've talked about online the last few weeks. Nicki Minaj's cousin's friends, Lil Nas X has been completely and totally dominating. So it's not that culture is not influencing our politics. It is really every day. And I think part of it is a matter of pointing that out to the people who can give you money and green light the projects that you want to do.
Great. Yadi, do you want to share any of your experience on this specific question?
Yeah, I would say also think of partnerships. Sometimes like you don't have to create your whole campaign. Like if there's a way you can partner and leverage the skill set. We're not artists, we're not the talent. We are organizers and activists, but we partner with many artists that were talented and very passionate about engaging our community in one of the most important elections of our lifetime. So we created those alliances, those partnerships that made the work go by so much easier. And that really, if you're in the leadership position and you're thinking like, well, it's not going to cost us much, we're going to have help, we have folks that have experience in this, it's much easier to move projects like that along.
Wonderful. Wyatt, Betsy, thoughts on this before we move to the next question?
No, I think I got it. Let's go on to something else.
Great. Well, that sort of dovetails into the next one. Like, how do we measure success when it comes to cultural strategies? Obviously, it's not exactly the same as conventional political campaigns. What are some metrics that people can use? What are some yardsticks that we can look towards in terms of measuring the success of cultural strategies in organizing? And maybe Wyatt, can I kick it over to you first?
Sure. So, I think I go back to my very first comments around defining cultural strategies. And, I think this thing of how it is, creates the environment upon which better organizing can happen. And I really mean that not to just because it's the reality, right? One of my favorite stories. This was in 2008 in Western Pennsylvania, working with healthcare workers who were knocking on doors, trying to get people to vote for healthcare, vote for Obama. We managed to get 3 to 4 members of the cast of ER, which was still long off television by that time. And those cast members came to Western Pennsylvania, knocked on doors, and with the organizers who themselves were hospital workers. So there was a meta moment going on right there. And lo and behold, when they would knock on the door, it would be, oh, wait, that's Jeannie. Isn't she the one that had the affair with so-and-so and blah, blah, she's at our front door and is here talking about healthcare and why we should vote for Obama. High persuasion area. But what I didn't expect, and this goes to the measurement, which all of the organizers told me about later, was how hyped the organizers and canvassers remained for the next 4 weeks of that campaign, because in this weird way and celebrity culture, there was an affirmation that what they were doing really, really mattered. And they felt like, I need to tell Gloria Rubin, or I need to tell, this person what happened, because that was the inspiration. And I think we find that in so many ways where culture impacts the way people think. I also would just point out that I thought Pete Cronowit had a great example as well in the thread that was a little more tangible than what I just said about work that they were doing in Virginia and how it increased audience participation by 36% in terms of getting volunteers.
Excellent. Yeah, loving the commentary and the conversation and the resources also in the chat. And thank you for that, Wyatt. Betsy, if I could hand this one to you. This person's wondering, what role do community members, activists, organizers, and advocates play in terms of building cultural strategies in addition to artists, comms professionals, funders? I guess if you could just break down the different stakeholders involved in putting together these plans and how you can go about structuring your goals and campaigns with all of these different types of folks in mind?
Sure. Well, the great thing about culture is that it's all around us, as I said before. And, you know, my approach and our approach is that artists are strategists, and strategists and advocates can be creative too. That doesn't mean that we don't center the work of artists as labor and compensate them, but there are definite roles for community members, for all different kinds of stakeholders to play. So if there is going to be if there's going to be an engagement with artists, with professional artists, that's one thing, but there is also an engagement of community members with the type of performance, music, food, fashion, you name it, that takes place in your community, as well as your organization. So I think there isn't, you know, other than the negative, which is sidelining artists and bringing them on late. And it's really important, if you are going to engage artists, that you respect them and bring them into your strategy. They are amazing strategists themselves and can add to you. And then bring people together to ideate where you want to do and what goals you want to meet.
An excellent point. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm seeing a really important question here, and I think I want to throw this out there to see who wants to take it, not directed towards anyone in particular. I know that we all have experience with this. We've been talking today about these, you know, smashing success stories, these wildly impactful campaigns, but not everything's a smashing success, right? So what are some of the strategies that didn't work, and what can we learn from attempts to engage artists or launch cultural strategies that kind of fell flat, and what can we learn from that? Anyone want to bite on that one?
I'll volunteer as tribute to share a failure story. As you probably guessed from my case study, I like nails. So we partnered with Task Force on a second attempt at a nail art thing, and Yossi is active in the chat, and he's fantastic, around Asian American Heritage Month. And we were trying to tie it into support for Asian Americans, especially because of the violent attacks that had occurred earlier in the year. And I think, and that campaign was not as successful. That project was not as successful as when we did the election nail stuff. And then back in June, we did a third nail thing focused around Pride, which was hugely successful. And I think that there were a couple of reasons why the Asian American Nail, Stop Asian Hate Nail Project didn't perform as well as the others. One, we were too late in the cycle. So people had already been talking about Stop Asian Hate, and I think that there were fewer Google searches for it. Two, it was both with the DOTV and the Pride Now stuff, it was a much more uplifting message. And three, it may not have been the right tactic to show support for Asian Americans when the issue was anti-violence. So if it had been a different kind of thing, and this is not a great example, but a better example. So if it was something around Shang-Chi and representation of Asian Americans in film and TV, that possibly could have been a better focus than what we tried. So that we tried it, it was hard to get people to say yes to participate, and it got less traction.
Great, thanks so much, Michael. It's important to hear those perspectives as well. I know there's a ton of questions. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but there's at least two more that we want to touch on before sharing resources and closing out the call. This one is an important one. One topic that we want to touch on is the difference between cultural competence versus cultural appropriation. How do we define these things, and how do they differ? So Yadi, can I kick that over to you first?
Sure. Well, definitely our focus is a Latinx, serving the Latinx community. So we tailored each campaign to the community we were trying to target, because it's not a one size fit all. So with that, we made sure that we were working with consultants and vendors creating the content that also knew the community. So all of the folks, the artists that we work with, they're all from the community. The artists that are portrayed, that are showcased in the gallery, a lot of them are political activists. The creator of La Borinqueña is Puerto Rican himself, and that's the band, the Las Cafeteras, also organizers themselves. They're very passionate. All the folks that we work with, we're very lucky to be finding artists that are very politically engaged. They're very passionate about the community and empowering the community to participate. When it comes to cultural appropriation, I mean, like, I think any other, well, I can't speak to all communities, but we definitely need to make sure that we're involving the community, that we're not talking to the community from a different lens, that is not coming from folks that actually are culturally competent. So for folks trying to do these campaigns, making sure that you are tailoring campaigns to a specific community, bringing folks in, hiring consultants that are from the community or they are culturally competent of the community. Because the last thing we want is folks to be appropriating our culture to do campaigns and not even involving the community.
Absolutely. The very, very important points. Thank you. So let's try to get at least one more question in. And this is also one that I think a lot of folks probably have on their minds. People often consider celebrity engagement as being perhaps the holy grail of influencing culture, or at least, a big one, a big get. Everyone wants to try to get Beyonce to give them a shout out. What are your thoughts on celebrity wrangling, and how does it compare to organizing in the cultural space in other ways, and perhaps aggregating micro influencers? So if you could just break that down a little bit for us in terms of the cost and benefit of working with celebrities versus other types of cultural strategies. Maybe Wyatt, if I could kick it over to you first for that one.
Sure. So, I think there's at least two things that come to mind right off the bat. Number one is just, celebrity engagement is not exactly something that should be transactional. It's not a can of soup that you pull off the shelf, but is a relationship that you have to develop and build over a certain period of time if in fact you're trying to engage with particular celebrities or influencers. The second thing I think I would say is, in effect, it's not all that. It's not the holy grail, and that if in many cases, if you focus on local influencers, micro influencers, and develop those relationships, if you live in Atlanta and you know somebody who's an emerging spoken word poet there, very good chance that ultimately whatever that poet produces, somebody who works for Tyler Perry in Atlanta sees it, and lo and behold, you sort of have big fish, little fish kind of syndrome happening. But those relationships are also important because those local artists are the ones for which you can really think about what you're trying to do and how to do it in a way that is way easier to accomplish than all of the full, bubble of people that are surrounded by celebrities. So those are I have more to say about it, but I'll make those 2 points.
Great, Betsy, were you going to jump in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in to say, and I saw somebody reiterated this on the chat, that we did a study called The Case of the Cultural Influencer that we'll mention as resources later. But like what we really found out is that it's really important that those influencers have credibility within the space that you're working in. So that, I showed, both Michael and I showed working with Kerry Washington, but Kerry Washington is in it. So just somebody from their perch saying stuff isn't necessarily enough, and it would back up what Wyatt is saying, that people really connected to your community, and what Yadi is saying are really, really important.
Very, very helpful. Thank you both for those answers. So I want to be mindful of the time. We're a little over, and I know a lot of folks are are busy and have other calls they want to get to, there's at least one more portion that we want to quickly cover, and that is resources. So I think we actually have a slide that we can pull up that that covers a few different resources that folks have to share. And then also that link there at the bottom has a list of other links that are really helpful. But why, if I can kick it over to you to maybe kick us off on some of these resources that we have pictured here.
Yeah, so on the left, you see the cover for the publication Making Waves, which I think is still, who has the Bible on cultural strategies may still be an open question, but I would suggest this is at least on the shelf with those breakthrough work done by a number of cultural strategists. Encourage you to get it, and you can download it for free as a PDF. On the left is the homepage for Into Action, which we've talked about already. If you have not seen it, by all means go. Lots of great static images and in particular GIFs. I understand now over 18,000 GIFs that you can download in different sizes and that are now searchable by issue. So go to those. And again, as Rio mentioned, there's also this bit.ly link at the bottom, which will take you to several more important resources we pulled together. And I'm going to ask Betsy to talk about the image in the middle and help wrap this part up.
Hey, thanks, Wyatt. That image is from the We Can Thrive Together project that I talked about with Amplifier. And as I mentioned, those are open source images, the discussion guide and the curriculum. You can get it all, you can use it. If you go to Opportunity Agenda also, we have the research on cultural influencers called The Case of the Cultural Influencers, along with recommendations of how to work with influencers. And a few different media analysis of portrayals of immigrants and Black men and boys in the media that also have recommendations about what you can do to change those things. I'll toss it back to you now. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Incredibly helpful resources listed here. And for more information and to dive deeper, as mentioned before, please do consider filling out the form that's been shared in the chat, and the folks on this call can help provide more information. Someone can follow up if you do have particular challenges that you're working through in your own work. We are coming up, if not a little over time at this point, so we're gonna get ready to close us out. I think we have another slide with all of our websites and contact information if you want to reach out to us on Twitter or visit us online. You can find all of our information here. I'll pause here for a moment. We had planned to give everyone an opportunity to give closing remarks, but I see a lot of folks are already having to jump off, but maybe I'll pause for a moment just to see if any of our panelists have any final thoughts that they want to share before we close out.
So I'll just say, I think we always felt like this was a very introductory part of this conversation. We would love to hear from people if, you'd be interested in going into some aspect of what we've talked about today more fully. The potential for doing more of these sessions, I think, is quite possible and doable. So I would just, encourage you to let us know about that. And by all means, I hope this at least inspires you to walk into the office of the president of your organization, say, we've got to do something about cultural strategies in the next year. Right.
Right on. Indeed. Well then, yeah, keep an eye out for potential similar events like this in the future. And in the meantime, you can get in touch with any of the folks that presented today using these handles. And again, you can fill out that form that's been shared to get more information and dive deeper. So with that, thanks again, everyone, for coming out. Thanks to all of our panelists. I'm so glad that we were able to do this all together today, and look forward to having more events like this with you all in the future. Thanks, everyone.